Hey class, Mr. Goyette here. Just wanted to check in with you. You see that you're all progressing pretty well. Some of you are a little bit behind, but let's get caught up. I noticed Rosie's doing a good job of catching back up right now. Will is also catching up. Ryan's staying in there really well. Good work, everybody. Need to touch base with Austin or check in with Miss Medina, see how he's doing, but most everybody have touched base with you at some point. Now, the stories we read over the last couple of units, just wanted to take a second to discuss those with you and share some ideas. And of course, first and foremost, remind you we're in our last 4 weeks of this 9-week session. So take stock of where you are. If you hopefully you're getting into Unit 4 or halfway through it. If you've stayed on track and are really looking to finish up on time, it'd be nice if you'd be done with Unit 4 early this week, so you'll give yourself more time to study for the final in our final week. Okay, so for let's discuss the stories just for a second, and you can either respond to me via email or you can bring a discussion of these topics to the discussion board where we can review them at further detail. But I'm just going to give you a little rundown of some of the themes, because a few of you were a little confused on sometimes the plot, or confused about actually the characters in the story. Some of you got confused about the themes of the story. So if you're confused about those fundamentals, it's really hard to answer the questions correctly. So let's go over some basics, and maybe some of you can go back and revise your work to improve your grades. So let's look at the most dangerous game first off. So in this story, we know that Zaroff hunts down Rainsford. Rainsford, you know, he's a hunter. He loves the sport of hunting, and he falls off a boat, ends up on an island, and is hunted down by this General Zaroff, who is a curious character, a very intense general. He loves the sport of hunting, and he wants to take it to the next level, and for him that means hunting humans. So he's not so much into killing animals, he's into homicide, and he makes a game of it. He plays with Rainsford like a cat with a mouse in some instances. But as Christian and I discussed in class, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And in Zaroff's case, that's how he gets it. Rainsford ends up tracking him down and nailing him, and he says, one of us will sleep in this nice bed tonight, and one of us will be fed to the dogs, and we know who that is at the end of the story. Much like a story that 10th graders were reading early on this week, The Monkey's Paw, early on in the unit, during these first 4 weeks, The Monkey's Paw, there's almost a be careful what you wish for, or kind of theme or moral there. And in this case, you have the character in Zaroff, General Zaroff, who is, you know, in taking on this, taking hunting to this level of homicide, is choosing to, of course, put himself in the situation of being murdered, and that's exactly his fate by the end of the story. So I enjoyed discussing that with Christian last week, and a few of you, as well as others, over the last couple weeks. Let's step back to the Cask of Amontillado. I know that was a pretty frustrating story for many of you to get through, so let me just address it. This is a psychological thriller. It's really what Poe ends up doing here. Edgar Allan Poe, is he creates a genre. He's one of the early mystery writers. He's also one of the early horror writers, and since he was so ahead of the game in creating this genre, this psychological thriller of being kind of stuck in the main character's head as he plans out this murder, in this case of Fortunato, and luring him into the catacombs because he's so terribly upset that he inadvertently insulted him, or mistakenly insulted him. We can see that Montresor is a very disturbed individual. Some of you responded that his character, his attitudes didn't seem very disturbing to you. I would find that rather unlikely, but I know that sometimes what you want to do is you want to sound like, oh, nothing surprises me, because I've seen gory movies and horrible things on HBO or just primetime TV, so can't shock me anymore. In this case, being that you are in the head of a murder, his thoughts, his ideas, the whole idea of premeditation is kind of what you want to focus in on, and in that sense, it is a disturbing narrative. And again, I want to go back to that word genre that I mentioned earlier. Genre, you can think of it, a simple definition as type. In this case, type of literature, but genre can be referred to as a type of music, a type of art. Genre can be a type of film or style of filmmaking. So in this case, the genre that we're looking at is the psychological thriller or horror genre that Poe essentially creates in mid-1800s. And what you want to think about with Poe is obviously the vocabulary was difficult, but as you're doing that, write those words down. We can go over them in class. Let's see, where was I? Then we moved over to the Lincoln Preface, and I'm not hitting every single thing that you read over the last couple of weeks, but I wanted to talk about the Lincoln Preface because it's an important story. Rosie had some questions that she posted in her journal that I'll bring up. She was actually trying to figure out some more key facts about Lincoln. After reading the Lincoln Preface, Sandburg's a wonderful writer, but sometimes since he's writing so poetically about the subject, you actually miss some of the key facts about Lincoln's life. It's not a clear biography like some of the things that we've read. And in the Lincoln Preface, you see that Sandburg starts off with this beautiful passage. In the time of April lilacs in the year 1865, a man in the city of Washington, D.C. trusted a guard to watch at the door. And the guard was careless, left the door, and the man was shot, lingered at night, passed away, was laid in a box, and carried north and west 1,000 miles. Bells sobbed, cities wore crepe, people stood with hats off as the railroad burial car came past at midnight, dawn or noon. And in that, of course, a quick summation of his Lincoln's assassination. But what you don't get are all the lined up facts, which we get in another narrative. John Wilkes Booth kills Lincoln at the Ford Theater, and of course this is at the end of the Civil War between the North and the South. And some key facts that you were asking about in class that which you didn't get time to discuss in detail. Sandburg mentions the suspension of habeas corpus, that is, that Lincoln did not allow people to have a trial by jury in some cases. Well, when you're in war, as the war that we are currently in with the War on Terror, Bush has done a similar thing. That was also done in previous wars and during the Alien and Sedition Acts, the War of 1812. You saw the suspension of habeas corpus in some cases. So basically, that's been a fundamental right, and some of our executives Sandburg calls Lincoln a despot. The word despot has been used to describe Saddam Hussein. I wouldn't say that they were equal in any way, although Lincoln did have to take some measures that were extreme to get through the war and keep the Union together. In discussing that, we didn't really get into the details of the fight between the North and the South, but obviously, just as a reminder, since this isn't a history class, but it is a literature class, and it's important to remember a few key facts. The North was rapidly industrializing. You had the textile industries there. You had more factories. You had the railway being developed, and transportation was being built in the North. The South was principally agrarian, so farmers for the most part, and that slave system, what was often entitled the regrettable institution for the South, was the way that they made their money, because you had your free labor. The South held on to its slavery for that reason, because they couldn't compete with the North, and it became the big point of contention between the two regions. That's what leads to your Civil War and eventually the abolition of slavery. Lincoln did hold the Union together, and he says at the beginning of the war that he'll do that even to make some concessions in terms of allowing some regions to maintain slavery. He eventually comes closer to the abolitionists' opinion and goes forward to completely annihilate it. And then you went on to read 3 or 4 poems where they're discussing Martin Luther King's legacy. And like Lincoln, the details about his individual life, what some of the authors are trying to show you is that while both these men were tremendous icons for as far as